Hi, I'm Odalyn. My husband's family locked me and our baby outside in a blizzard. 15 below zero. Through the frosted glass, they laughed and yelled, "Freeze to death, failure!" And when I called for help, he texted, "It was just a joke." But the real punch? He stole everything we had, $57,000 gone to cover his mother's gambling debts. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I wrapped my child in a blanket and disappeared. By morning, they were blowing up my phone with 65 messages, but by then, something in me had changed. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where are you right now? Drop a comment below, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's the moment I chose silence over survival and turned it into power. I used to be afraid of snow as a little girl, not just the cold, but the silence that came with it, the kind that made you feel like the world had forgotten you. My dad would shovel the driveway while I watched from the front window, bundled up in a pink coat that swallowed my face. He'd look up, notice me standing there, and say with a half laugh, "Real women stay inside where it's warm." And I believed him. That memory floated through me as I stared at the frost crawling up the corners of our back door. The wind had picked up fast, howling low like it was searching for something. There was a blizzard warning on the local channel, nothing new for Indiana this time of year, but something about tonight felt still. Not the peaceful kind of still, the kind that made your neck tense, your breath shallow. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when I heard it, the screen door clanging against the frame. I paused, towel in hand. Caleb was upstairs putting Elia to bed, or at least that's what he said. But I didn't hear their usual giggles or his silly bedtime songs. Just wind. I set the towel down and walked toward the back. The door was cracked open. I frowned, reached out, and gripped the knob, but before I could close it, Velma's voice tore through the hallway behind me. "She's outside! Lock it!" I turned just as I heard the front door slam shut. My heart jumped to my throat. I spun back, and there it was, the porch light already flickering. I dashed to the living room window, Elia now clutched in my arms, her little body limp with sleep. Caleb stood on the other side of the glass, his eyes fixed on me, expression unreadable. He didn't move, he didn't wave, he didn't even flinch. Velma appeared behind him, face twisted in a cruel grin. "Freeze to death, failure!" she snapped, then barked a laugh. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just knocked, then pressed my forehead to the glass. "Caleb," I whispered, "please, open the door. Elia's not even wearing a coat." No answer. The cold bit through my sweater. Snowflakes swirled around us, sticking to my scarf, my sleeves, my daughter's soft hair. I shifted her in my arms and pulled my old beige scarf tighter around her shoulders. My fingers were already going numb. The porch light clicked off, and just like that, we were standing in the dark. I could hear the storm, wind slicing past houses, sleet ticking against the siding. Inside, the light from the kitchen window still glowed, yellow and soft. I saw a shadow move behind the curtain, and then his voice. "She'll be fine. It's just a test. She never fights back anyway." It was Caleb. He didn't shout. He didn't sound angry. He sounded bored, like I was a game they were done playing. I swallowed, forcing myself not to cry. Elia stirred, whimpering into my neck. I stood there for minutes, maybe more, just trying to make sense of it. The air burned. My legs started to tremble. I leaned against the porch rail and pulled Elia's hood over her head. She felt so small, so light. That terrified me more than the storm. Then I remembered a night 3 years ago. Caleb and I had just moved into this house. I had told him I felt uneasy about his mom always showing up uninvited, criticizing my cooking, giving Elia candy even after I asked her not to. "She's tough, but she means well," he said, like it was supposed to comfort me. Another time, Velma handed me a grocery bag on Christmas morning. Inside was a dented can of mushroom soup and a size 12 bra I didn't need. "Some women appreciate practical gifts," she said with a smirk. I'd thanked her. I always thanked her. I felt a vibration in my coat pocket. With trembling hands, I fumbled out my phone. The screen was fogged, and I had to swipe twice before it opened. A message from Caleb. "We were just joking. Come back in. Don't overreact." Joking? I looked down at Elia's face, pale and pressed to my shoulder. Her eyelashes were frozen, her lips dry. I placed my cheek against hers. I didn't text back. Bye. Instead, I walked, slow, deliberate, toward the garage. I remembered the spare key we hid behind the vent panel after Caleb locked his wallet in the car last winter. I used to think he was forgetful. Now I wondered if it had been a pattern. Inside the garage, it was dark and even colder. I laid Elia gently on the back seat of the old Ford, wrapped her in a blanket from the trunk, then slipped into the front. The key turned. Nothing. I held my breath and tried again. The engine sputtered, then caught. I exhaled, hands trembling on the wheel. I didn't look back, not once, not at the porch, not at the window. As the house shrank in my rearview mirror, something inside me snapped so quietly, it almost felt like peace. The road blurred behind the frost-covered rear window, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. Not on the outside, at least. I drove with both hands gripping the wheel, my knuckles white. Elia had curled into the passenger seat, her head resting against her backpack, still bundled in the scarf. Her tiny breaths fogged the window beside her. 10 miles out, the streetlights thinned, and I finally saw a dim neon flicker. Budget in, weekly rates available. It was the kind of place that smelled like old cigarettes and rain-soaked carpet, but it had a roof. Heat. A door I could lock behind me. I pulled in. The engine wheezed to a stop, and the silence hit louder than any shout. Inside the office, the night clerk didn't ask questions. He barely looked up, just slid a clipboard across the desk and mumbled, "ID?" I hesitated. My fingers hovered over my wallet, but something inside me stopped short. I didn't want the name Audlin Wallace typed into a system tonight. I didn't want to be found. "Can you just put Lena?" I asked softly, avoiding his eyes. He shrugged. "Sure." I slid over one of the crumpled bills from my coat pocket, $87 for a room with peeling paint and a space heater that rattled when you moved. I carried Elia in my arms like she was still a baby. Her boots thumped against my thighs as I laid her on the bed. She didn't even stir. The heater clicked on, a weak hum. I sat down at the edge of the mattress, coat still zipped, and stared at the cracked ceiling for what felt like hours. When I finally took off my shoes, my socks peeled away, stiff with ice, but I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Morning came like a whisper, not a sunrise, but a soft golden glow bleeding through the cigarette-stained blinds. I hadn't slept, just watched the light shift minute by minute as Elia's little hands clutched the comforter and her breathing stayed steady. My phone buzzed against the side table. I picked it up. 65 new messages. I didn't open them right away. I just stared at the number, letting it sit there like a bruise. Eventually, curiosity won out. "Where are you?" "You left the house unlocked." "You're scaring Mom." "This isn't funny." Then Velma's name appeared. "Grow up. Come home before you ruin everything." I closed my eyes and put the phone face down. The heater clicked again. The thing is, I didn't feel anger, not then. I didn't scream or throw the phone or curse the sky. I just felt used up, like a light bulb left on too long, warmed past use, dimmed past recognition. I needed to know if I could afford one more night, one more meal, one more tank of gas if it came to that. I opened my banking app and logged in. The digits popped up. 1692s. I blinked. Refresh the page. Still there. I scrolled backward, trying to trace the line. I knew the balance had been over 58 grand last month. My freelance projects, the tax returns, some of Elia's savings. Then I saw it. Wire transfer, $57,000 label, Velma Medical Fund. I stared at the screen like it had personally slapped me. Medical? She wasn't sick. She wasn't even in physical therapy anymore. And something else. Something I hadn't let myself consider until now, the whispers I'd overheard. That call she took in the kitchen. "I'll win it back," she'd said, laughing into the receiver. "I've got another shot Friday night." And suddenly it all made sense. The late-night drives, the errands that took 4 hours, the loan she asked Caleb for that he said was handled. She hadn't taken the money for her health. She'd gambled it. $57,000. Gone. I felt my hands shake, not from cold this time, but from something deep in my chest. A quiet fury that didn't boil, didn't explode. It crystallized. 6 months ago, Caleb had said, "Let me manage things. You've got enough on your plate. You do the projects, I'll take care of the money. That's what a husband's for." I'd laughed, kissed his cheek, handed over passwords. That laugh now echoed in my skull like a fool's bell. I reached over, pulled my laptop toward me, and opened a new tab. New account. First name, Odalyn. Last name, Marin. My maiden name. I filled out the forms quickly, methodically, like filing paperwork after someone's death. I transferred the $16.92 into the new account. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wouldn't fix anything. But it was mine. Then I wrapped my phone in a plastic zip bag and stuffed it under the second drawer in the motel nightstand, where the Bible usually sat. I opened location settings, turned off GPS tracking, deleted my iCloud session, burned the trail. They wouldn't find me because I wouldn't be looking back. Elia stirred. "Mama?" "I'm right here, baby." Her eyes were heavy, still swollen from the cold, but her voice was warm. I brushed a hand across her hair. "You hungry?" She nodded. We ate dry cereal from the vending machine downstairs. I made her smile once by pretending the tiny bag was a treasure chest. Then I watched her fall back asleep to the hum of a cheap cartoon playing on the TV bolted to the wall. I stepped outside, phone in hand, and stood next to the ice-glazed railing. I stared at the numbers in my contacts. Most of them were pointless now. Clients, neighbors, Caleb's coworkers. Then I saw it. Harper Fields. We hadn't talked in years. She'd gone to law school while I had Elia. We used to be close. Laughed over late-night pizzas and bad poetry readings. My finger hovered for a moment. Then I pressed call. 2 rings, 3. "Hello?" It was her. "Harper?" A pause. "Odalyn?" My chest tightened. Hearing my name spoken like that, like it meant something, made my throat catch. I didn't know what I was going to say. My voice felt foreign in my own mouth. She waited. Then, "Hey, take your time." I swallowed. I need to know how to protect my daughter, and myself. Legally. Quietly. Another pause. "You okay?" "No," I said. "But I will be." I watched my breath rise into the icy morning air as she began explaining next steps, slow and clear, like she knew I was standing on the edge of something and didn't want me to fall. When I finally hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand, and in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the silence. The silence they mistook for weakness. I didn't sleep that night. I lay still in the shelter's bunk, watching Elia's tiny chest rise and fall beneath the donated fleece blanket. Her little hand still gripped the corner of my sweatshirt, even in sleep. I wanted to believe she felt safe again, but I knew better. Children can sense the crack in your voice before you do. 2 days had passed since the motel. A caseworker had found us a spot at a transitional women's shelter on the outskirts of town. The air in the hallway smelled like canned green beans and cheap disinfectant, but the doors locked. There were no shouting matches behind the walls. And the women here? They didn't look away when we passed. They looked me in the eye, some with nods of respect, others with sympathy I couldn't yet accept. At night, once Elia drifted off, I pulled out my laptop and worked again. Just like I had before. Caleb started saying things like, "Why don't you rest tonight? Let me handle the bills." I was writing product blurbs for a skincare company. things like hydrating overnight serum with natural botanicals. I'd never used the stuff, but the words came back easily, like an old rhythm I didn't realize I missed. That morning, I walked with Elia to the library a few blocks away. It was quiet, warm, and most importantly, free. While she sat in the children's nook flipping through picture books, I asked for a visitor's pass and signed into a computer. "Still working on your kid's book?" The librarian smiled, glancing at my sketchpad from yesterday. "Yep," I nodded, tapping the keyboard. "Gotta research some villain names." I was lying, of course. I wasn't looking for dragons or goblins. I was searching court records, county filings, civil claims, and Velma's name kept popping up. Not once, not twice. 4 different small claims, 1 garnishment filed just 8 weeks ago, and all of them, everyone, tied to gambling debts. Not medical, not insurance, no hospital records, just creditors, court letters, and the same handwriting scrawled across them all. Hers. I leaned back in the chair, heart steady but fists clenched. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Velma wasn't sick. She was addicted, and someone in that house had covered for her. That's when the memory hit me. Not a gut punch, but more like a slow sting that spreads through your chest. It was the weekend before the storm. A Sunday night dinner, just the 4 of us. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and that ever-present fake cheer Velma put on when company was around. I'd asked Caleb where he kept the hot sauce. He told me to grab it from the pantry. But when I passed Velma's home office, he'd mumbled something about her jacket being in there. "Just toss it over the stair rail," he said. But the door was locked. I remember now how odd that felt. It was always open, always cluttered. But that night, the keyhole blinked red. On the doorframe stuck near the handle were 3 yellow Post-it notes. They looked random then, but now I could almost hear her voice saying them. Second drawer. Tax slip. Greenwood Casino. I hadn't thought much of it. Not until I noticed the small black safe tucked beside the filing cabinet with a digital screen blinking low battery. It was barely bigger than a lunchbox. I'd assumed it was for documents. Now I knew it held more than tax returns. I pushed back from the library desk and took a deep breath. My phone buzzed. It was Harper. I stepped outside to take the call. The wind had picked up and leaves scratched along the sidewalk like whispers. "You need to start collecting anything. Emails, texts, screenshots, even if it's not direct proof. Start a trail," Harper said. "I found something," I whispered. "Tell me." I scrolled to an old voicemail. I hadn't noticed it before, dated 3 weeks ago. It was from Velma. I'd never listened, just assumed it was another vague complaint about the heat or Caleb needing to mow the yard. I hit play. Her voice came through slurry and bitter. "If Caleb doesn't get that 50 grand by Monday, I'm done. I told the dealer to blame me, not him. He's soft, always has been, can't stand the pressure. So I took it on. It's my debt. But don't you let him say I didn't try." I stared at the phone. My hand shook, not from surprise, but because I wasn't surprised anymore. I saved the recording, forwarded it to Harper without a word. Then I opened my notes app and began building the timeline. Shared account opened 6 months ago, Velma Medical Fund transfer, 3 days before Blizzard, voicemail confession, dated 3 weeks ago, text from Caleb, "You didn't really earn that money anyway." That last one sat in my stomach like spoiled milk. I scrolled to that message again. He'd sent it while I was sick, 2 weeks into the flu that knocked me flat. He said it so casually, like I was just borrowing space in my own life. "You didn't really earn that money anyway. I'd taken freelance jobs while breastfeeding, stayed up writing until sunrise while Caleb snored beside me, skipped new coats in winter to meet deadlines. I earned every penny. That night at the grocery store, I used my EBT card to pay for bread and eggs. My pride fought me, but I let it go. For Elia. Near the pharmacy aisle, I heard her voice before I saw her. Well, Velma said, "You're looking thinner. Bet blizzards do that." I turned slowly, made sure Elia was busy picking a snack, then met Velma's eyes. She wore her old smug grin, the kind that always stretched too far. I smiled back, soft, even kind. "Gambling debts do too," I said. She blinked. It was less a reaction and more a crack, a fissure, one she wasn't used to feeling from me. I walked away without another word. Later that evening, Harper sent a message. "You won't believe this. Velma's second mortgage? Forged. We may have leverage." I stared at the screen. Outside, the shelter lights buzzed. Inside, Elia lay in the top bunk, hugging a stuffed fox someone had donated. I reached over and touched her hand, then whispered aloud so only I could hear it. "We're not going back." And that night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of snow. I dreamed of courtrooms and silence breaking like glass. By the time morning light cracked through the thin shelter blinds, I already had my sneakers on and my bag zipped. The cold wasn't just in the air anymore, it had settled somewhere inside me, steady and sharp. While Elia slept with one arm tucked under her cheek and her other hand clinging to the stuffed bear I found at a second-hand shop, I quietly stepped out and walked 2 blocks to the legal aid center Harper had recommended. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and tired carpet. I gave my name at the counter and sat with my hands folded tight around a notebook, like it could anchor me. Harper arrived 10 minutes later with a woman in her 30s, sharp suit, soft voice, eyes that had clearly seen too much. Her name was Alyssa, a paralegal. She introduced herself, shook my hand, then flipped through the folder Harper handed over. Then she stopped. "This name," she said, tapping her pen on Velma's signature. "This isn't the first time we've seen her. 2 years ago, civil court, elder financial exploitation. Another time, forged checks. She never gets charged criminally, but she leaves wreckage." My heart beat slower hearing that. Not faster, slower, like something inside me was focusing. "She has a pattern," Harper added quietly, "and you just gave us a real chance to expose it." They started right away. Emergency protection orders, review of marital assets, a request to flag any ongoing claims involving my name. The word spousal financial abuse was written at the top of a new file. I didn't ask how long it would take. I just nodded, one breath at a time. Later that afternoon, Harper drove me back to the shelter. She offered to cover a motel, but I told her not yet. Something about staying there, among other women trying to survive whatever had hit them, made me feel less alone. She understood. That night, as Elia colored quietly next to me, I found myself staring at the corner of the room. Not at the wall, but at something in memory. It had been 2 months back. Early December. A day so normal I wouldn't have remembered it at all if not for what I saw. I'd brought Caleb lunch at his office. Just a quick drop-in. He'd forgotten his wallet and texted me, irritated. His firm was dull and beige, tucked between a real estate office and a shuttered dentist. When I stepped inside, the receptionist barely looked up. I remember setting the bag of food on his desk just as his supervisor passed by. He was holding a folder. "This is your wife's paperwork," the man said, handing it to Caleb. "She needs to sign it as primary. That's the only way the benefit goes through." Caleb fumbled the folder like it was on fire. Yeah, I'll take care of it." I remember frowning, thinking it was some health form. Now I knew better. The next morning, I made my way back to that office. I straightened my coat, looked the receptionist in the eye, and said as evenly as I could, "I'd like to check if there are any life insurance policies under my name." The woman hesitated. "Are you a policyholder?" "I'm the insured," I said. "Or at least I think I am." She typed slowly, then faster. Her eyes flicked back and forth across the screen. Something changed in her face. "I need your ID." I handed it over. A minute later, she printed something and slid it toward me like it might bite. My name, my birthday, status, deceased, claim pending. I stared at it. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. She started stammering, saying something about it being a mistake, an error, maybe a duplicate file. I didn't respond. I just stepped back and dialed Harper. She showed up in under 20 minutes. By then, the supervisor was involved, and they knew it wasn't just a mistake. Caleb had submitted a pre-claim for a death benefit, on me, 5 days after the blizzard, filed under a temporary missing with assumed fatality clause. Harper requested every document. The admin tried to delay it, but Harper's voice didn't rise. It just cut through the room. "This is a potential felony. I suggest you cooperate." The woman turned pale. They handed over everything. That night, Harper drove straight to the sheriff's department. I sat beside her quietly, gripping my folder like it was the only thing holding my bones together. We filed for emergency fraud protection. Caleb's workplace was notified. An internal audit was launched. They promised an investigator would call within the next 24 hours. At 9:30 that night, as Elia slept against my side, my phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "You seriously think you can destroy our family like this?" I stared at the screen, not because it shocked me, but because the man who sent that actually believed I was the one doing the destroying. I typed back slowly. "What you tried to destroy isn't your family anymore." I pressed send, and then, finally, I let the silence settle around me like armor. Not fear, not sadness, just stillness. The next morning, Harper picked me up for the court date. Temporary orders. It was just the first step, but it mattered. I wore a plain navy sweater, combed Elia's hair, packed snacks for her to wait in the family room. The courtroom was small, carpeted, quiet in that oppressive government building way. Velma was already there when we walked in. She didn't look surprised, just smug. Her lips curled as I passed. "Must be nice," she murmured, not looking at me. "Getting all this attention just for playing the victim." I said nothing. Harper leaned in. "Let her talk. She's losing her grip." The judge called the room to order. Velma sat alone. Caleb didn't show. Harper presented our petition, the audio recording, the forged documents, the policy pre-claim. The judge looked over the evidence carefully. Then he looked directly at me. "I'm granting temporary protection effective immediately. All assets are frozen pending review." Velma blinked. Once. Then her mouth opened like she might argue, but she didn't. As court recessed, Harper leaned in beside me. "She's not in control anymore. You are." I nodded, but I didn't smile. Because power is a funny thing. It doesn't return quietly. It comes clawing back, teeth first, in the dark. I didn't sleep the night before. Not deeply. I kept one ear tuned to the hallway, half expecting footsteps or a knock that never came. In my dreams, Caleb's voice didn't shout. It whispered, and when I opened my eyes, the whisper stayed in the room like fog. By mid-morning, the sun had come out, but it did nothing to warm the tension in my chest. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a bowl from breakfast, when I heard a car door slam. Then another. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and peeked through the front window. There they were. Velma in a pastel cardigan and pearls, her arms crossed like she owned the porch. Caleb stood behind her, hands in his coat pockets, pretending to look sheepish. I didn't move. She rang the bell twice, then leaned close to the door and said, "Adeline, honey, we just want to talk. Let's be civil, for the child." Civil? After trying to bury me under false insurance claims? Caleb's voice followed, soft and practiced. "We miss you. Both of you. We just want to fix things. Maybe we all made mistakes, but we're still family." I didn't open the door. I just picked up my phone and started recording. They stayed there a while, Velma trying different tones, cheery, maternal, vaguely apologetic, like she was testing which bait I'd bite. I didn't bite. Eventually they gave up. I watched them walk back to the car, whispering urgently, Velma shaking her head. When the engine turned over, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. But deep down, I knew people like them never showed up unless they were already 5 steps into a plan. The plan arrived the next morning, sealed in a certified envelope with my name typed too neatly. Custody petition. They were suing for full custody of my son. I sat down on the edge of the couch, holding the paper in both hands like it might catch fire. They called me emotionally unstable, said I was financially irresponsible, that I had a documented history of abandonment. There was even a sworn statement from a neighbor, someone I'd only nodded to once at the mailbox, claiming I'd left my son alone for hours. It was a lie. All of it. I called Harper. She picked up on the second ring. I barely managed to say, "They're going for custody." Silence on the other end. Then her voice, cool but taut, came through. "This isn't about custody. It's about breaking you. They want to scare you into silence." I swallowed hard. Then they picked the wrong woman. That afternoon, Harper came by with her laptop and a yellow legal pad covered in notes. "We're gathering character witnesses. Anyone who's known you as a mother, teachers, neighbors, doctors. We build this clean. We build it solid." We started with the preschool. Miss Lorna, my son's teacher, didn't even hesitate. "Velma once told us you were just the babysitter," she said. I didn't believe it, but I didn't know what to say. Next was a nurse at the ER who remembered the blizzard. She called the desk 3 times trying to get access to your medical records, claimed she was your emergency contact. Harper nodded slowly. "They've been planting seeds for months." I clenched my fists. "And now they're trying to make me look like I don't even belong to my own son." Harper looked me in the eye. "Then we dig. And we fight. And we show them that truth doesn't scare like lies do." The next storm came 2 days later. It was almost sunset when my cousin Sarah called me, her voice trembling. "Odalyn, I didn't know what to believe. Velma called me. She said you were using again, that your kid wasn't safe." I leaned against the kitchen wall and closed my eyes. "Sarah, you've known me your whole life." I know, I didn't believe it, I panicked. I'm sorry." 10 minutes after we hung up, a knock came at the door. 2 people, a man and a woman, government badges. "We're from Child Protective Services," the woman said, her tone polite but firm. "We've received a report and are here to conduct a wellness check." I let them in. I kept my voice even. I answered every question. I let them inspect the bedroom, the fridge, the medicine cabinet. My son sat on the couch drawing a dinosaur with crayons, humming under his breath. He didn't even flinch. 30 minutes later, they stood at the doorway. "He's safe. You're doing fine," the woman said. "We're required to follow up, but I'm not concerned." When the door shut, I finally allowed myself to kneel down and hug my son tight. He looked up at me, confused. "Mommy?" "Nothing, baby," I whispered. "Just wanted to hold you." They could smear my name. They could twist truths and invent stories. But they couldn't touch this quiet, breathing proof that I was still standing. The next day, Harper showed up with a folder in her arms and something new in her eyes. "Steel. They want to turn this into war? Fine, but we're not playing defense anymore. We counter." I sat across from her at the dining table, heart thudding. She opened the folder. Inside were preliminary motions for a lawsuit, emotional abuse, medical fraud, attempted identity theft, endangerment. "This isn't revenge," she said. "It's protection. It's drawing the line." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed. Then I looked at her and said, "Start with fire." Because the only thing they fear more than losing is being seen for what they really are. The wind had started to pick up when we got out of the car that morning, early enough that dew still clung to the courthouse steps. Harper walked ahead of me, her tote bag stiff with case files, while I followed, holding my son's drawing folded tightly in my coat pocket, a small blue house with a tree, and a dog that looked suspiciously like our neighbor's pug. He had drawn a sun in the corner, big and bright. "That's us, Mama," he'd said. "The light." I carried that paper like it was armor. Inside, the courtroom was all hard edges and quiet echoes. Pale wood, stale air. No music, no softness. Velma and Caleb sat already at their table when we entered. She turned, catching my eye with that rehearsed little smile, polished, confident. Caleb's gaze darted away like I'd burned him. The judge entered promptly, a woman in her 60s with sharp posture and a voice that didn't bother with pleasantries. Let's keep this straightforward, she said, flipping open her folder. I value truth over theatrics. Velma tilted her chin, lips pressed together. Harper barely blinked. I sat still, my knuckles white around my pen. Then it started. Velma's lawyer, a slick man with too much gel in his hair, stood and nodded to the clerk. Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to present evidence relevant to the mental fitness of Ms. Marin. He pressed play. At first, there was only silence, and then my own voice, raw and trembling, filled the room. Get away from us! You don't get to stand there, don't touch him! Get away! It was the sound of a woman unspooling, shaking in a blizzard-lit kitchen with a baby in her arms. But without context, it sounded like madness. The courtroom shifted. A few heads turned toward me. Velma sniffled delicately. This is who's raising that child. I couldn't move. My pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that, but something tightened in my chest, like shame trying to bloom. I reached for the paper in my pocket. The house, the sun, the blue crayon sky. That was real. Harper rose. Her voice came steady and cool. Your Honor, she said, we have the full, unedited version of that audio. This clip is deliberately altered. The judge leaned back. Go on. Harper turned to the tech clerk. Play ours. This time, the recording started with a different tone. Velma's voice sharp. Go ahead, snap. That's what you do, right? You always break. Then Caleb's quieter. Mom, stop. She's holding the baby. Then mine again, still terrified, still shaking, but now the fear had context. A woman pushed to the brink, protecting her child from a mother-in-law who'd always believed she was disposable. The judge's jaw flexed. She looked straight at Velma. Did you submit the original file in discovery? Velma didn't answer. Her lawyer stood, adjusting his tie. We believed? Sit down. The judge cut in. Next witness. Velma's lips thinned, her nails tapped the table, and then the screen flickered on behind the judge's bench. A Zoom window. My therapist appeared. Calm, mid-40s, wearing glasses and a gray cardigan. She nodded once and began. I've worked with Ms. Marin for the past year, she said. She has symptoms of complex trauma. That's not instability. That's survival. She's taken every step to heal. What I've seen is resilience, commitment to her son, and courage. Would you say she's an unsafe parent? The judge asked plainly. Quite the opposite. Velma's lawyer objected. Hearsay? Speculative. She's a licensed clinical therapist. The judge snapped back. Your objection is noted and overruled. I breathed in, for the first time in what felt like an hour. The judge turned to me. Ms. Marin, you've handled this with more poise than most people would? I nodded once. My voice had stayed in my throat the whole morning, but I didn't need it then. That one sentence was enough. After recess, the courtroom cleared slowly. Velma stormed out, her heels sharp against the tile. Caleb hesitated in the hallway, looking like he wanted to say something. Outside, the air was warmer. The parking lot buzzed faintly with cicadas and car doors slamming shut. I didn't say a word, just walked past Caleb as he muttered, I didn't know they'd use that recording. I swear I didn't. He was behind me now, not in front. My son's hand fit into mine, his fingers still sticky from the granola bar Harper gave him earlier. He didn't ask questions, just walked quietly beside me, his little steps matching mine. Harper caught up, pulling out her keys. We're ready for the next one? I glanced at her, eyes forward. Born ready. Because the only thing they fear more than losing is being seen for what they really are. But what I didn't expect was the letter waiting at home with my father's handwriting on it. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my building, the courthouse felt like a different world, one where truth tried to squeeze through tiny cracks, and for once, didn't get buried. But real life was quieter, colder. The street lamp buzzed faintly overhead as I stepped out of the car. There was a dull ache behind my eyes, part exhaustion, part adrenaline refusing to settle. I carried my son inside, his head tucked into my shoulder, fast asleep. That's when I saw it. The envelope. Plain, cream-colored, no return address, just my name, in my father's handwriting. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at it. I put my son to bed, changed into an old sweatshirt, made tea I never drank, and sat with the envelope in my lap until the mug had gone cold. Finally, I opened it. The paper inside was thick, yellowing at the corners, as if it had waited a long time to speak. The date in the corner stopped my breath. It was written 3 years before he died. If you're reading this, it means they pushed too far. I read the sentence again. Then again. I never thought Velma would go this far with you. I thought she'd stop at control. I thought I owed her something. Maybe I did. But not this. My hands began to tremble. Odalyn, Velma is not your real mother. That line broke me open in a way I didn't even know I could crack. She raised you, but not because your mother didn't want you. Your mother fought for you. I let her lose. I pressed the paper to my chest, not crying. Not yet. Just still. The rest of the letter was full of shame, apologies, small memories I never knew he held on to. And tucked behind the page, another document, a legal one, a notarized custody agreement. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers catching on the raised seal. It was real, signed, stamped, official, and it said everything. My biological mother hadn't left me. She had been pushed out by Velma. There was a clause. No contact until the child reaches legal adulthood. It was signed by a lawyer I vaguely remembered from the few times I'd been dragged to some stiff office as a kid. The name hit me hard. I flipped back to my father's letter. I tried to fight her. I lost. She told me she'd make life hell if I didn't give her full custody, and I believed she could. The ache in my chest sharpened into something deeper, older. A soundless wound ripping open from the inside. I stood up. My apartment suddenly felt unfamiliar. I walked to the living room bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album. One Velma had once slammed shut when I asked why there weren't any baby pictures of me. Now I knew why, and once I started remembering, I couldn't stop. How Velma always said things like, "Your mother didn't want this life," or "She left you. I stayed." The bedtime stories she used to read me, every single one ended with a mother disappearing. A girl growing up strong without her. I used to think that was just Velma's version of tough love, but it wasn't. It was the groundwork of a lie. Even my father, he never said much, but there was one thing I remembered clearly. One night when I was 13 and had just come home crying from school after a girl told me I must be adopted because I looked nothing like Velma. He found me in the garage, curled up behind the tool bench, and all he said was, "You're not like her." I thought he meant my attitude, but now he meant blood, truth, and he had buried it. I don't remember sitting down, but at some point I was back on the floor, surrounded by pages. My son stirred in his sleep down the hall, murmuring something soft. I pulled my knees to my chest. Everything I believed about my childhood had been curated. Every photo, every absence, every silent answer. Velma didn't just erase my mother, she erased my right to know. She built herself into the only mother I'd ever known, by silencing the one who tried to love me. A few hours later, Harper called. I told her everything. She asked for photos of the document, which I sent immediately. 10 minutes later, she texted, "This is real. This is enforceable. She gagged your mother until you turned 18, and Velma knew you'd never think to question it." I sat on the couch, unable to move. Then something shifted. The quiet inside me wasn't helpless anymore. It was cold, clear. I walked to my son's room, leaned down beside his bed, and brushed the hair from his forehead. He stirred but didn't wake. I whispered, "You'll never have to wonder if you were wanted." Back in the living room, I opened my journal. I didn't write much. Just one line. "They raised me on silence. I'm done being quiet." The next morning, after making breakfast and walking my son to daycare, I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my laptop, and searched for a name I hadn't dared type in over 20 years. Her name came up. The city matched. So did the photo. Older now, but the eyes were the same. I took a breath, then another, and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then she answered, and her first words shattered everything I thought I knew. She didn't say, "Hello." She didn't even ask who I was. Her voice was warm but trembling as she said, "I've waited 30 years to hear your voice." I stood there frozen, hand still wrapped around the phone, while the room faded behind me. There was no need to confirm anything. The way she said it, I just knew. I cleared my throat. "Hi, You don't have to explain," she interrupted gently. "I'm just glad you called." We agreed to meet the next afternoon at a quiet cafe near the train station. I chose the spot, neutral ground, not too loud, but not too intimate either. I didn't know what I'd feel when I saw her. I barely knew what I was feeling even then. The next day, the sun came and went, like it had no idea the world had changed. I sat in a corner booth, nursing a warm coffee that had turned bitter with nerves. Every time the bell above the door jingled, my stomach twisted. And then she walked in. Lena. I didn't need a name tag. Her eyes were mine. Her chin was my son's. She had the same nervous half-smile I used when I didn't know what to do with my hands. She stopped at the booth, hesitant. "Odalyn?" I nodded slowly. When she sat, she didn't speak for a long time. She just looked at me like she was trying to memorize everything in case I disappeared again. "I thought about this moment for so long," she whispered. "I'm not sure what to say now that you're actually here." I swallowed hard, unable to form words. Lena pulled something from her purse. A worn folder, edges frayed like it had been opened 100 times. She slid it across the table. "They made me sign this." I opened the folder, hands already shaking. Inside was a legal document, stamped and notarized, dated when I was just over a year old. "If I came within 50 feet of you before your 18th birthday," she said softly, "they said they'd have me arrested." My eyes snapped up. "Arrested?" "They told the court I was unstable, that I abandoned you, that I had no job and no family support, and I didn't, not back then. I was 19, working 2 part-time jobs. Your father had already married her." "Velma," I muttered. She nodded. "She offered money, said I could keep some dignity if I left quietly, that it would be better for everyone. But I didn't want money. I wanted you." I read the contract again. One line stood out, underlined in red pen. No visitation, no communication, no mention of maternity. She leaned in, voice tight. "I never had a lawyer. I didn't even know I could fight it. And when I tried, when I showed up at your house once, she threatened me with jail time, said I was endangering you." My mind kept drifting back to childhood, to the nights Velma told me bedtime stories about runaway mothers and crazy women who left their babies behind, to how she'd always say, "Some people don't deserve to be parents," to the drawer I was never allowed to open, the hallway wall with no baby pictures, the way my father used to pause before saying, "You're not like her." And now I knew why. Velma didn't just hide my mother. She rewrote the whole story. "I thought I was crazy for missing someone I never met," I said, voice shaking. Lena reached out, resting her hand on mine. "You weren't crazy. You were robbed." The ride home felt like I was moving underwater. My head pounded. Every sound around me seemed distant. I opened the apartment door and just stood there, unsure what to do next. I found myself in the kitchen, clutching the edge of the counter like it might steady me. My son was at the table, quietly coloring. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, Mommy." That was all it took. I knelt beside him, pulling him close, my arms around him like a shield. "You'll never have to wonder if you were wanted," I whispered into his hair. "Never." That night, After he was asleep, I sat with the documents Lena gave me. I took photos of everything, every stamp, every line, every signature. I opened my blog, normally filled with parenting tips, emotional essays, and pieces about surviving grief and rebuilding from scratch. But this time, I titled the post simply, "The Mother I Wasn't Allowed to Love." I told the truth. No rage, no dramatics, just facts. The contract, the threats, the silence. I uploaded a picture of the NDA, another of Lena holding me as a baby, taken before the separation, and I hit publish. By morning, it had thousands of shares. Emails flooded in, some supportive, some stunned, others heartbroken. A few asked if I was going to sue. A local reporter messaged me through LinkedIn. "Would you be open to an interview?" I ignored it. For now. But something had shifted. I felt it like a low rumble under my feet. For the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. I felt seen. Midweek, I sat at my kitchen table sipping chamomile tea when my phone buzzed. "Romy, take that down. You're embarrassing us." No, "How are you?" No, "What happened?" Just embarrassment. I didn't respond. Caleb never reached out at all. Velma called once, left no voicemail, and honestly, I was glad. Her silence said more than any voicemail ever could. Later that evening, Harper knocked on my door. She didn't say much, just handed me a cup of coffee and sat down. After a few moments, she said, "You did good." I looked over at her, tired and unsure. "Did I?" She nodded. Quiet truth burns slowest, but deepest. Let it do its work. I sat with that. Not every victory is loud, but just as I began to breathe again, just as I thought the worst had passed, I got a letter, certified, thick envelope, no return address. Inside was a summons. Velma had filed for defamation. The letter was on cream-colored cardstock, too formal for junk mail, too heavy for anything friendly. I tore it open without thinking, standing in my kitchen with coffee still brewing behind me. It wasn't a letter, it was a petition. Velma had filed for emergency conservatorship over me. According to her lawyer's filing, I was exhibiting signs of psychological distress and harassing family members through delusional accusations. They cited my blog post, screenshots of my community fundraiser, even the updated birth certificate filing with Lena's name. They called it a pattern of erratic behavior. My hand froze, still gripping the edge of the envelope. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart pounding not from panic, but disbelief. After everything. She still thought she could control me like a child she hadn't raised. 10 minutes later, my attorney Carla was in my living room. She didn't say much at first, just glanced through the packet and exhaled like she'd been expecting this. "I filed a preemptive injunction last night," she said, setting her coffee on the side table. "We knew she might try something extreme. She's overplaying her hand." "Can she freeze my accounts?" I asked. "Not anymore. The injunction covers all immediate access to your finances and medical records. She's already a step behind." I sat back, numb, but not broken. This wasn't fear. It was the final play of a woman who built her life on lies and was watching them slip. 2 weeks passed like a drumbeat leading up to the main act. The hearing was set for Friday morning. The courtroom was sterile but quiet. Just a few benches, a polished floor, a wall of books behind the judge's bench. Velma arrived with her lawyer in full tailored navy and pearls. Her expression? Wounded, practiced, just enough to look noble under strain. I walked in with Lena beside me. The judge, a woman in her 60s with salt gray curls tucked into a bun, read through the papers in silence for a long time. Then she looked up at Velma and said flatly, "You filed for emergency conservatorship based on blog posts and updated records. Is that correct?" Velma's attorney stood. "Your Honor, these are not mere blog posts. Ms. Marin has made inflammatory claims about my client, statements which have caused emotional distress and could damage our family's reputation." Carla stood. "Your Honor, We're prepared to present evidence that substantiates every claim made, including notarized documentation from a private legal transaction executed by the petitioner over 30 years ago. I took a breath and stepped forward with Lena. We presented the original NDA, signed when Lena was 19, no legal counsel, terms that accused her of instability in exchange for money. We presented financial records, payments Velma had authorized from accounts I was supposed to control. Every signature was hers. Then Lena stood, hands shaking but head high. They told me I wasn't fit, that if I ever showed my face again, I'd be arrested for violating a family agreement. I didn't abandon my daughter. I was erased. The room went still. Velma flinched. Her lawyer opened his mouth again, but the judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough," she said. Then she turned her eyes on Velma. "You've mistaken cruelty for concern. That's not going to fly here." The petition was denied on the spot. Velma didn't speak. Her lawyer gathered their things with a clenched jaw, avoiding my eyes. When they walked out, Lena exhaled beside me, like she'd been holding that breath for decades. Later that weekend, I pulled into Caleb's driveway one last time. His porch lights were on. The yard looked smaller than I remembered. Romy peeked through the curtain, then disappeared. The door opened slowly. Caleb stood there, older somehow, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. "I didn't know about the NDA," he said quietly. "And yet," I replied, "you still let her sit at dinner and call me someone else's mistake. And you said nothing." He didn't answer. I reached into my coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. I placed it gently on the step, not handing it to him. "That's the last mortgage payment," I said. "It's still unsigned. I figured it should stay that way." I turned and walked back to my car. No final speech, no screaming match, just the sound of gravel under my heels and a door that never closed behind me. The following Tuesday, Lena and I sat together in the records office. The clerk double-checked our forms, typed a few things, then nodded. "It'll be official in 7 business days," she said. Velma's name, struck. Lena's name, restored. For the first time in my life, my legal identity matched the truth of my blood. I chose to hyphenate my last name, not out of bitterness but as a bridge between who I was and who I had reclaimed. That same week, the lease was finalized on a small brick building near the east side. It used to be a dental office, run down but full of light. We painted it soft green. I hung up a simple sign in the front window. "The 15 Below Fund, support for single mothers in crisis." It was named after the night I spent outside, 15 degrees below freezing. The night I understood exactly what survival costs. Harper showed up on opening day with a tray of lemon scones and a stack of forms. "I told you," she grinned, "you light a slow fire and people will find their way to it." Donations came in faster than expected, mostly anonymous. Volunteers signed up. A retired nurse offered counseling. A woman I hadn't seen since high school dropped off handmade baby quilts. Some days I just sat behind the desk and watched the sunlight crawl across the floorboards, letting the silence wrap around me like a blanket I had finally earned. One Friday afternoon, I drove to the lake. It was where I used to sit with my son when he was little. We'd toss rocks and try to skip them, but he always laughed more than he focused. I stood at the edge, wind brushing my face, eyes closed. "They thought freezing us out would break us," I whispered. But all it did was make us fireproof. And I meant it. I'd been erased, rewritten, and dragged through lies I never asked for. But now, my name was mine. My story was mine. And my silence was no longer something they could hold over my head. To the woman still standing in someone else's shadow, you don't owe them your silence.